I am mixed Luna Rose Lococo. My pronouns are AN. I identify as pansexual queer, as well as aporigender, agender, fluid, intersex. I am Nahua, Irish traveler, Polish Jewish, and I identify as mixed race. And we are also polyfidelous.
And I'm Chris Lococo. I am agender. I use they, them pronouns, and I am pan as well. And I'm a mutt of European descent, and yeah, we are married.
So I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder from having unaccepting parents who told me that I was disgusting for being who I am, which is I was born most likely intersex. They did not disclose that in the 90s, so the doctors took me away for 4 hours before finally returning me to my mom, and they just said, raise me as they assigned me a gender. I have been recognized legally by the state of Montana as the first person who is biologically non-binary. And so my PTSD comes from the abuse that I suffered as a child at the hands of my caregivers. I had a therapy cat that we trained to give deep pressure therapy and to notice when I was panicking. She unfortunately passed on election night 2020, which was a very stressful time anyway, on top of losing a support animal. So I at that point realized that I needed a service dog for medical care at that point. Yeah, so having a service dog was clearly the direction that we needed to go in order for me to reassert control over my life, to be able to have access to normal things that people need to do. So I found a cute little puppy on Craigslist, and we brought him home, and he was the sweetest baby we've ever had. We basically treat him as our son, and he took to training so well. We started training him at 7 weeks old. He learned how to sit. We got him his vaccinations as soon as possible. We got him neutered as soon as possible. We put him into daycare so he could get socialization as soon as possible. We found a trainer who specifically does court-ordered bite inhibition training.
We actually had him set up with a trainer, which was Gigi Moss, who, as Lou mentioned, is one of the people that was part of the court-ordered program for training. So we were trying to make sure that we found a trainer that was really well vetted with the county and the state. He went to puppy kindergarten class a moment that he was able to, graduated from puppy kindergarten.
He went to Obedience 1 and 2. He did great.
He had a weekly training regimen, which we would handle problem situations and also extend his training past the normal obedience into skills such as cover, which is deep pressure therapy. Yeah, I mean, this was an incredibly important thing for us because it was an avenue to your independence.
Yeah, and I went from being stuck inside most days to being able to go out and do things that I need to get done most days, like grocery shopping, like going to doctor's appointments. It gave me the ability to live my life as a normal person to have this service dog. So we moved to a new neighborhood during COVID because our apartment was a little bit too small. However, there was at least 2 neighbors who were extremely bigoted towards us. We faced multiple hate crimes, such as having our house egged, having our pride flag taken down. This became very popular for the children in the neighborhood to say things like, look mom, that lady has a beard, she's going to the opposite of heaven.
Originally when we moved in, it was the middle of summer, and one of the very first things that we did was, oh my god, we have a sidewalk chalk art. We're going to make that happen. So we went out and bought a ton of sidewalk chalk, and Lou would spend all sorts of time in front drawing all sorts of positive affirmations and these giant murals about, what it's like to be proud to be gay.
What it's like to be proud of being from Colorado.
What it's like to be proud of being a survivor. And we actually had a wonderful relationship in the beginning with the neighborhood kids. We gave out most of the chalk that we bought so that they could do art and stuff like that, including to the families that weren't necessarily approving of us, that were saying things like they go to hell.
Yeah.
But over time,
kids started drawing rainbows on the sidewalk, and they started saying nice things about people.
And that didn't sit well with some of the more bigoted members of our community.
Got to the point that children started throwing rocks at me, which is when we realized that we needed to leave the neighborhood.
And so that continued parade of microaggressions led to Luna feeling much more under siege and attacked and tense, which led to Cerberus feeling that way as well. So in order to do any kind of progress with training, we had to remove ourselves out of the situation to do training, meaning that it was much more difficult.
That being said, we identified that this was an issue, and we found a new trainer who specifically works with reactive dogs in order to try and get him to be less reactive to our neighbors. And we informed our neighbors that we had found this new trainer and that we'd like to work with them. And that's when things really started escalating very quickly. It was my birthday. We had just gotten back from looking at a new place in Denver to potentially rent because we felt so unsafe at our home that we decided to leave the situation. That morning, our pride flag had been taken down by somebody. It had been physically unclipped from the pole, and I just kind of brushed it off because it was my birthday and I wasn't going to let anything bad mess up my day. We had just gotten home. We were getting ready to go to the botanical gardens to celebrate my birthday. And the man who had taught his children and weaponized the other children in the neighborhood to be bigoted towards us and to pace their whistling. He waited for me to open the door. He whistled because our dog is recall trained, and he had seen us recall training our dog in the area near our home. And when our dog left the house, he was wagging, and he went to go greet the man because he had just been called outside. He thought it was a reward for, we'd been working on some DoorDash training. And he went up to this man wagging, and the man kicked him squarely in the ribs. My dog responded by biting him, and I yelled for him to stop. He put all four paws on the ground, looked me dead in the eye, and then the man kicked him again. He then started beating my dog up and put him into a headlock, slammed his spine into the ground, and started trying to choke my dog to death.
I ran down the stairs and found a man that wasn't a fan of our family laying on top of our dog in a chokehold. Wanting to gain control of the situation, I ran up immediately, got control of our dog with a restraint hold that we learned from a Brandon McMillan masterclass, and got a hold of him and said, "I've got him now, let go." And he said no. I'm like, what? I've got him. If you're afraid, you can, exit the situation. Go. Like, I was thinking in my head, why are you still here? I've got the dog. Go.
I think that's when I realized that there was a look in his eyes that he wanted to kill my service dog. If it was up to me, I would have continued to just try to de-escalate the situation, but this man was intent on being violent and reactive and refused to let go of my dog even when my dog was no longer moving.
I know this is very traumatic.
Yeah. As soon as I was able to pull him off of my service dog and off of my spouse, I let go of him, and we immediately took our service dog inside. I did yell at him for kicking my dog.
And he started screaming about calling the cops.
So as soon as I got my dog inside, I asked him to go kennel. He did so immediately. And I called animal control because we have a good working relationship with them, and I didn't want there to be an officer shooting my dog incident. So I called animal control and told them that they need to come immediately.
The man basically wanted to press as many charges as he could have invented. As I mentioned, the EMTs had shown up, checked him out, and left long before the police could finish taking statements. There was no damages, he needed no first aid. Then he also wanted to press assault charges against Luna for touching him, and the officer, while not understanding the full context, could at least see that very clearly Lou had not been intending to assault another person. So while the officers were trying to ascertain what had happened, we were talking mostly with the animal control officer, which we mentioned before we actually had a very good working relationship with. And Lafayette's not that big of a town. And during this process, the officer was going back and forth, and a couple of times, while letting the officer in, I was able to witness the EMTs taking care of our neighbor, and effectively he had no injuries. So whenever there is a bite of any kind, regardless of culpability, the dog is always put on a 10-day quarantine just to make sure that there's nothing with rabies or anything else going on medically. We were adhering to that entire regimen plus additional stipulations that we put on, and this man saw us outside since he took to pacing around our home carrying a large metal pole. And he spotted us one of the times we were taking our dog out to use the restroom. And he started, trying to get our attention from across a lawn and trying to get, saying, "You're allowed to have that dog out?" And we have all this on video, but essentially he was trying to antagonize us to hopefully provoke another incident. Shortly thereafter, we learned from the animal control officer the next day that he had been harassing both the district attorney as well as the animal control officers. Unfortunately, the way that we found that was while we were out putting down a deposit on a new place, because within 3 days we had already located, toured, and settled and signed on a new home to get out of the situation and get away from that family. We received a phone call from the ticketing officer saying that there was an issue with the ticket and they need to reissue the ticket with the correct date. When we arrived, it wasn't just the tickets being reissued. The man had complained and demanded the surrender of our dog to such a vitriolic degree that the DA had no choice but to acquiesce to deal with him.
Not just the surrender, but he also wanted our dog euthanized.
This wasn't just a dog. This wasn't just a family member. This is also a service pet, service animal, and Lou's emotional support network.
A medical assistance device. Like, legally under ADA law, he's considered a medical assistance device. And I was asked to surrender my medical assistance, my emotional support system. I was asked to not only put up with the humiliation of having charges against me for saving my dog, but also to completely surrender and have my service dog impounded.
And that was probably the most frustrating and disempowering part of this, was how everybody could agree that this situation was wrong, how every person that saw the evidence, because there's evidence, there's a lot of it, every single person was like, wow, yeah, this guy is escalating things, wow, this guy's instigating things, wow, this guy's a bigot, why is the system not fixing this? And it's because, unfortunately, when it comes down to it, our system still isn't built to elevate minority voices. His anger was more important than Luna's mental health, my mental health, or Cerberus's very survival. I'm not going to mince words here. Lou spent the majority of the 20 days that Cerberus was incarcerated suicidal.
I view this as also a case of disability discrimination.
Absolutely, because there should be, as I said, provisions for when there is an emotional level of necessity that means that this dog was not just a random dog that ran up and bit a family. This is a very important piece of medical equipment that provides an incredibly irreplaceable function. We were fortunate and unfortunate in equal parts to be in a financial position where we had the assets available. This was expensive. We ended up spending, between the process of moving rapidly, taking an $800 a month rent increase, as well as 2 lawyers, moving costs, and everything else on top of it.
Plus paying for our dog to be impounded.
We ended up costing somewhere around $20,000. And this was all medical costs to us. This seems like a legal issue because it involved the legal system, but this was a health issue. Because at the core of all of this was Luna's mental health and how we were going to handle that. And that at no point was taken into it. There was no justice, there was no health justice, there was no health equity. This was completely dismissed as a reason for, oh, their health doesn't matter, it's just the law.
The fact that the person who was accusing us of all this was a suspect in hate crimes against our family was conveniently omitted as well.
So the good news is that we, with the support of the community and with all of our resources, were able to come to that plea agreement and get our dog back so that we can start the healing process.
It's scary.
Yeah, you got treated by the system like a big scary queer instead of like a victim whose medical support was literally kicked. And we want to make sure as much as we can that that never happens to anyone ever again.